I hope it's live. And you can see my slides right now.
We can see them, thank you.
Very good. So just a brief introduction into TÜV, as it's in Germany well-known testing, inspection, and certification institution, over 160 years old, with over 25,000 employees globally. It's one of the leading market players in the TIC business globally, and I am since more than 4 years at this institution and developing additive manufacturing standards, strategy, certification, services. That means we are a German team, we are a Japanese team, we have a Singapore team, and we are building up our US business as well. My personal motivation led me to this job as I started the career in AM 2008. And this is where I met Max Munsch, the following speaker as well. So together we worked in Hamburg, and I was in charge of setting up an AM production for the dental processes. Dental is one of the first, by the way, one of the first most successful applications using AM in production. So here are millions of crowns and devices produced each year, and this is where all other industries actually can learn of and see how scaling works with AM. Following on this experience, made it in 2 years setting up an AM production for dental, I could work together with EOS for 7 years and develop further AM processes for production, which several devices related to medical and dental industry. We established Additive Minds, a consulting unit in that days in 2012. And this consulting unit let me travel around the globe. They visited more than 80 production and manufacturing sites globally to train and consult the production managers, quality managers on reproducible processes. In the meanwhile, I did my TUM MBA, so which leads me to a business design and entrepreneurship. So, and with this know-how, I could establish the service at TÜV, which leads to testing, inspection, certification with an additive manufacturing business. And this is where I, of course, work actively at ISO and ASTM side to drive the next level of standards in the industry, because standards are crucial to accelerate the success of AM and to bring the value into the business models. So starting with the requirements of industries, we should all understand that it's on the one hand side the technology which needs reproducibility, of course, and reproducible processes are key, and testing, inspection, and certification can help to initiate reproducible process, because we test according state-of-the-art standards, as well we train according state-of-the-art standards, etc. First of all, the regulated industries like aerospace, automotive, medical, they require validation of their manufacturing processes. Validation of existing technologies like casting, milling, is already existing since many years, and that's why it's a copy and paste approach. We have reference values, we have material properties where we can rely to, and taking AM as a disruptive technology for spare parts, for example, within some of these industries. In medical, we talk about implants, not spare parts, but it's kind of the same thinking. We're replacing existing material properties, and the validation requirement stays the same. So we need still to validate the device for safety, as well for quality, and as well the manufacturing technology. So therefore, we need to fulfill those existing requirements, and nothing is changing here. The way how do we validate AM is on the way to be standardized. If you look at the major pain points what the technology has, this leads us actually to the point what needs to be standardized, and where can we benefit really to accelerate the processes to minimize the risks. Just to give you a few examples. So taking the good old Ishikawa approach, which gives us here this overview. So machine in AM is kind of since 30 years available, slightly more, and it's still a process which is considered in production as very innovative, because the first 20 years was used for prototyping, so just appearing in production usage. That means we need to assure that the proof of reproducibility, proof of safety is there. So every standard which helps to give a proof to AM machinery and we can test and inspect and certify according to accelerates the adoption of AM. So easy it is. So and the first standards, which I will explain you later, are coming up here. As well, materials, especially if for powder bed fusion, where powders are dealt, are so highly contamination affine. If you take a material in a process chamber with the existing machinery, there's such a high chance of contamination by the worker or by the processes which are performed at the machine. Then it's incredibly risky, especially in comparison with existing milling machine, etc. So this needs to be standardized. How to standardize material maintenance and at the shop floors? Very difficult, because the factor human is so strongly involved. So what we did, we standardized the operational performance of a production site. So this standard I will introduce to will come later in a few weeks. Giving you another example for how to calibrate a system. So a validated process, we have the first standards in powder bed fusion for validation of their build processes. IQ, OQ, PQ performance is as well guided and standardized very soon on the way. Of course, the manpower, the training skills required for the AM industry is as well on the way to be heavy standardized, as well the how the factory should look like, and how innovation should be done with AM. But this is something where the entire ecosystem is working on. So let's have a look at the present standardization activities. The ISO TC 261, which you see on the top left corner, it's the major community for driving AM standardization. They work together with the F42 from the US, ASTM, and the fascinating about AM standardization is that there's a global agreement between ISO and ASTM side. So each standard which is written on the European level, on the ISO level, it's agreed with the American colleagues from the ASTM and handed over. So with this global agreement, we minimize the chance that there is a double standardization. So AM becomes actually a global standard because of this agreement, which is wonderful, because then we can really use the full potential of AM, enabling distributed manufacturing and manufacturing of spare parts wherever they are required, independent of regional issues, because we have a global standard for this technology. So let's take exemplary few standards. I'm the convener of the JG75, which takes care about industrial conformity assessments at AM centers. Here, the standards will be published in 2 months. I will explain the details later on. The JG72, JG means joint group, by the way, and joint groups work together with experts, and these experts write this particular standards in such a JG. So machine production process qualification, which I mentioned already, is as well a standard which helps to accelerate the IQ, OQ, PQ processes of powder bed fusion machines. IQ, OQ, PQ means installation qualification, operational qualification, and these were tasks which every regulated industry and validated industry need to perform, but now on we can rely on a standard. So this is a game changer and accelerates a lot, because let's say half a year ago there was no standard. So that means only few experts in the world were capable to perform a lean validation processes. Now we have a standard which helps everybody, let's say hands-on experience powder bed fusion experts to perform a lean validation process. This is direct impact on implementation cost. This save cost and time. Let's have a look at another interesting standard which I'm a fan of. It's a JG73, Digital Product Definition and Data Management. So this standard is very future oriented, and we are going into the definition of data packages which are required to build the digital twin within AM. And here we define how to collect and which informations are important of the entire AM process to build up a digital twin. So super interesting, and it's driven by AM experts as well. And it will for sure in future accelerate the adoption of digital quality assurance concept. So here on the left side, we are on the physical quality assurance side. On the right side, we are already working on the digital quality assurance concepts. In general, I believe in standardized implementation. So as soon as we have standards, there is a TIC institution which can test according to like and to suit. And this accelerates because the clear defined implementation requirements. The consultative approach is still very valid and very good, but if standards are strong and very credible, it becomes more sense to just use the standards which is existing. If there is no standard, of course, the consultative approach is the ideal way. The good old trial and error approach is as well valid and not wrong, but of course is the most cost sensitive one. So trial and error and learn from old mistakes needs to be done by each technology which does not has any reference, but for those like powder bed fusion, where we have thousands of installed systems already, the trial and error approach does not need to be made anymore. Now have a look at our concept, how we defined standardized implementation. And if we first of all look at the application specific requirements, it's difficult to really take all applications and say, if you get TÜV Süd certified or certified according industrial and production side, you will be able to work reproducibly for all applications. Of course, this is not possible. But what is possible that we use the typical AM pain points and pitfalls and standardize those that de facto human is working to avoid those. And this is what we did. So in the standard ISO ASTM 52920, we collected together all the well-known quality assurance measures in the production side, just to avoid that trial and error is happening. We are auditing these measures because they are well known, and the teams are performing much more faster towards reproducible and industrial ready AM production processes. There is still always an application specific risk. For example, if you look at these lattice structures of this implant here, which has a specific risk of powder removal, for example. This is an application-specific issue and needs to be taken separately. But how to operate a powder bed fusion system to produce such an implant is nearly always the same. I need to take care about my build process, the preparation stoppers, and removing of the parts afterwards, the post processes of the system. These are always the same steps. It doesn't matter what kind of parts I'm producing. And this is what is standardized in such a certification schemes on the left side, industrial and production side. We are training the quality managers how to set up a quality assured system, which fits perfectly and it's aligned perfectly with general quality management systems like 9001. And we developed a scheme for the machinery to combine the materials, processes on the hardware as a reproducible, to test them according reproducible output. Here's a small overview about AM specific risks from the machinery point of view. This is something what needs to be done for highly critical components. So if you have a highly critical component which is implanted in a human or and have the chance to cause deaths, or is flying around and has a chance to cause damage and deaths, then we need to use a risk assessment, and this risk assessment in AM is as well on the way to be standardized. This is the next step what I initiated at the ISO ASTM side, that we do a standardized risk mapping for highly critical components. This will help to accelerate as well the adoption within this sector, as risks are well known already for the let's say technologies like powder bed fusion. So we can standardize it. If we look at the big picture, so you see here an AM process overview from part requirement to quality control, and you see our modular approach, how to take out the complexity of such implementation and say, oh, do you have a certified build process? Okay, so that means there is already an IQ, OQ, PQ performed on a certain level, and we can use these values which were tested by a third party for further production processes and minimize the effort at the production side. Same on the production side. So this can be used to minimize the validation efforts and quality assurance measures. Here you see an overview what kind of trainings we can provide to the AM staff. So there's a quality and production management in AM. This is helpful for all production managers and quality managers which are in charge to set up a reproducible production. Health and safety in AM. Certain materials like titanium, etc., which are considered as risk materials, needs to be their treatment needs to be trained, and their staff needs to be install quality assurance measures to avoid explosion risk and health hazards. Industry standards in AM in general help to decide how to minimize the efforts on validation, how to fulfill regulated industry requirements, because you can use those standards to fulfill those, and you can install them in purchase agreements. So, example, establishing a purchasing system for AM spare parts internationally, you could, in such a purchase agreement, install standards which help you to monitor the quality. And this is something what we can train, of course, beside the fundamentals of AM, design validation topics, materials know-how, this is very specific for material science researchers, and of course risk assessment, what I already mentioned, to give you guidance how to perform a risk mapping in AM. Here you see an overview of a link to a standard which is for free, and you can scan this QR code and download this standard for free at Boyd. This is a German standard written in English, so it can be used internationally, and it's a first standard which was published, but this will be replaced by ISO ASTM 52920 within the next 2 months. So we have an international standard released very soon here. And this can be excellently used to manage quality of suppliers. So if you plan to have a supplier and production site performing reproducible processes, it's perfectly made for that. And I started to write this standard already at EOS 8 years ago, and right now we are there to make it really an international standard. So very proud of that, and it was a long journey. A lot of international experts contributed to this standard from aerospace, medical industry, and we took all interest of these industries into it. Here you see what kind of manufacturers are already today certified according to standard. So it's an overview of these manufacturers, and you see here different stakeholders. They are contract manufacturers, there's Evonik process industry, we have automotive and medical industries. So nearly all kind of stakeholders are involved, energy segment as well, because it's still AM what they use. So we developed here something not industry specific, we developed something AM specific, and that's why it works to be used in nearly all industries which are looking forward to use AM in production. An overview of the details of the certification program, the structure on the left side, the entire standards which are used in detail on the right side in the certification scheme. And this can be as well combined with health and safety audits and certifications, especially if you deal with hazardous materials. It's just an overview of how it builds on top. So on the bottom line, we have personal certificates for the staff in the shop floor. Then we have a quality assured production site, which I just explained. And then there's a build process certification. This is a very young service, which we just recently published and did here the first system certification together with Ultimaker, a well-known desktop printer, and Ultimaker published here this Pro series of desktop printers, which they go with into production, and they are quite often installed in assembly lines, helping to deliver spare parts on demand for assembly lines. Therefore, they decided to perform an installation and a reproducible AM build process certification with us, because it helps their customers to accelerate their adoption and to minimize the cost of installation, because IQ/OQ/PQ is partly already addressed within our reproducible AM build process certification. For that, we are auditing and testing Ultimaker's manufacturing side, then the material manufacturing side, and of course printing prods at our facility at TÜV Süd. Ultimaker sent us 2 systems. We were printing the parts, testing those, and testing according defined specs. All those are on the physical side, so which I explained, like training, auditing on facilities, auditing on the build process. And I believe that this physical world, transparency and standardization help us to transform as well to the digital quality assurance world of AM processes. There's a reason why. Of course, we want to utilize the full potential of AM, and this is distributed supply chain network. So we all know that there's one major business driver in AM, which is a distributed manufacturing, and this enabled only if we can assure reproducible AM processes. So this works via TIC testing, inspection, and certification and standardization. Then we need to install our printers globally, which they are partly already installed. Certify them, test them, and establish a distributed supply chain network. As well, it fulfills, by the way, quite often sustainability demands of the futures, as sustainability is as well taking care about CO2 emissions, about sustainable development goals, SDGs, as well as Lieferkettengesetz or other regulative requirements which are coming around within the next few years. So companies need to find answers how to fulfill sustainability. And Additive is one of these answers, so we can shortcut the supply chain, the global supply chain, and use AM within locally. As well, we can outsource production quite spontaneously if defined with quality assurance measures. As well, we can use material and reuse material within the printing process after recycling it. And we see all this happening in the industry. As you met already a couple of startups which are really working on recycling of materials for AM machines, as well as distributed manufacturing platforms which are helping to organize that. As well, we see the regulative side. So it's a wonderful movement, and AM is for sure part of that. What can a TIC player do, like TÜV Süd? Of course, we can certify digitally somehow, if possible. Of course, I see this happening, but it's a journey for the next 10 years for sure, as the process is still highly man-made. So the factor human is making the decisions in the process, and to certify that just based on data is for now not possible. So we can only certify parts of it, maybe as a next step, the build process on the printer, if enough sensors are installed and we have the mechanism to analyze those data from the sensors. Here, by the way, we are working in several founded projects with the industry to try the first pilots out for such a scenario. So we are collecting data from the production side and installing sensors in the machines to understand how to validate or qualify an AM build process based on the sensor data. So the first setups are already made and the first data are collected, and here we are defining the first kind of quality gates. But I see as well that the part itself, which is produced, is not just the build process, but as well the entire production process. And it's just one piece to qualify the build process. We need to as well take care about the pre-process and post-processes. So such a part DNA for the parts can be issued by TÜV Süd as soon there is a defined specification for those parts. And this is something what we are working on with pilot customers from several industries. Summarizing, there is a physical world certification business which we are already able to perform today. So enable your employees, the quality managers, the engineers for quality assured thinking in AM production. Then get an audit on a certificate or a certification for your production side, establish or ask your machine vendors to get a reproducible build process certification because it minimizes your time and costs during the installation and validation. And then finally, the product approval in regulated industries is supported by those processes because you can claim, look, we certified our build process according AM standards. We certified our facility according AM standards. So we are claiming for approval for medical, aerospace, and other regulated industries based on state-of-the-art solutions. And so we have we make the story round and finalize with a product certification. And as well, the transition to the digital service, which I just explained on the last slides, is enabled because we have standardized processes which are capable to be transformed and capable to partly monitor them digitally. And this happens step by step. That's why we have 2030 here on the agenda. Maybe it's sooner for certain applications. Maybe it's much more later for certain more complex processes. So this was my presentation. I hope you have questions for me.
Well, it appears there are indeed, Gregor.
Very good.
Thanks a lot. It's very interesting. At the same time, it does remain quite complex. In my impression, it's always a bit a matter of we, with the AM industry, need to play along with the rules of the regulated industries, let's say. And we're not there yet, and we don't perhaps always realize how important it is that we actually do follow those standards and rules. So I think you made it quite clear that it's and complex and needed for our industry, in fact. Now, as for the questions, a first one perhaps that came in, could you elaborate on what is in the pipeline on material characterization, especially for filaments?
Mm-hmm. So we can always test according a defined spec. So as a material filament needs to deliver regulated industry demands in terms of properties, features, minimum quality output. This is something what we always can deliver as a third party. So it's a role of a third party. So if you see that your industry partners wants to have a claim for a certain material property, we can always deliver that without any standard because it's a testing according a defined specification. So this is what TÜV Süd does on a regular basis with in all industries. A specific standard for AM filament materials, for now, I am not sure and aware of. So we we don't expect one very soon. There are design guidelines for filaments, of course. For the materials, I'm not sure. I am happy to dig into it and give you the answer on a later stage.
Okay, that's fine. But actually, I have the list myself, so perhaps I could also help him out, the person who asked this. But thanks for clarifying. A next question, and I can combine it actually with some point that I think is also important. The question itself was, I see joint group 55 for plastic material. Is this about FFF and LPBF of polymers? That's the question mark. But more broader, perhaps, we could also ask the question, if people want to step in, if people want to be part of making those standards, how could they, or how does that go? So, but more specifically for the joint group, if somebody said like, okay, I want to be in this joint group, or I want to also write on FFF of polymers, but yeah, how does that go? And then is it indeed true that the joint group 55 is for plastic materials for both FFF and LPBF?
No, it's just for FFF. So JG55 is FFF. I have to check if there is a PBF material specific joint group for plastic materials, but this one, JG55, is MAX, so it's FFF. MAX is the material extrusion. It's a standardized word. FFF is the process itself. Yeah. And they take care about MAX. And how to join in general, it's very easy. You just ask your national standardization committee that you would like to participate in the TC261 standardization. Then the committee will write to the secretary of TC261, which is the DIN, the German standardization organization. Or you just write me and I will forward you to the right person at DIN. But the official way, go through your national body, and there's a national body in Belgium for standardization, and you contact those persons to ask specifically TC2